And now, Deborah Kobylt live.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. Wonderful guest we have joining us today, Simone Knego. Thanks so much for being here, Simone.
Thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be
Oh,
here.
absolutely. And you're here to talk about your life and your first book, which is pretty amazing, The Extraordinary Unordinary You. And I was thinking to myself, Simone, you're extraordinary and you're certainly unordinary, that's for sure. For anyone who reads this book and hears about your story, um, this title is all you. So thank you for being here.
The,
Now, what I love about your story, Simone, um, I'm just going to, sort of start it a little bit and then have you sort of pick up. A very happily married woman with three beautiful biological children. And then you decide one day as a family how wonderful it would be to give to children who really are looking to be adopted. And you then added three other children, beautiful children, to your family. Your first, Noah, from South Korea, and then two other children from Ethiopia. So, why don't you walk us through that beautiful journey of being a family with three kids to then a family of six?
so we had three biological children first, and we had the conversation a while back in our marriage saying, do we want to adopt? And that basically came from there was a period of time after we had our first child. We didn't have our second child for 4 years. And so, it was discussion back then. And then, of course, as soon as, we started looking at different options, I found out I was pregnant. So we put it on the back burner. But after we had Olivia, child number three, we brought up the discussion and we kind of did the it's now or never, and the answer was it's now. And so we looked at what options were available to us, and for our first adoption we went with South Korea, and we were able to adopt Noah, who he was 4 months old when we brought him home, and it was an amazing experience. It was chaos, and I won't forget any moment of it, honestly. We were able
We
to
were you were
adopt
talking about
Noah.
initially that you went to South Korea because your husband was 43 at the time, right?
Yeah, so South Korea, the at the time, the oldest parent could that of the adopting parents couldn't be older than 43 years old, and he was 43. So South Korea was a program we chose for many reasons. The kids are in foster care, which we felt was really important, and also my husband's a physician, and so they had medical records, and my husband loved that idea. And so
Yeah.
that was the decision that we made.
What's amazing is you went over to meet Noah, um, who was what, 4 months old, I guess, at the time when you
Yep.
adopted him, with your son Jacob. So, what was it like when you first met Noah with your son? And what was the journey like back? Because reading that in your book, it was like, oh my gosh, I remember these times. So, go ahead.
We met Noah at the adoption agency with his foster mom, and that was such a special experience to see how loved he was. And then we had 2 days, so we had a very short
Wow.
meeting, and then we had 2 days, and then we on our own, and then we met with the foster mom again, and then she said, Here's your son." And it was a really special moment because you could tell really how much she loved him, how much she cared for him. She cried when we left. It was really it would I had this sense of guilt, but I also felt really good because I knew how loved he was, and I thought that was
Yeah.
so important. Every child deserves to be loved.
But that's so incredible when I read about that in the book. The love that she gives to the foster children that she fosters, I think up to 30 of them at that time, right? It's got to be so difficult for her to give these children up, but then she's doing such a good thing to give them such a beautiful start in life with all that love and holding, right?
Yeah, I learned after the agency told me that she had been a foster mom to over 30 children, and that was to me that was so special. It was like completely selfless. She, I don't, I think I would have a really hard time, saying goodbye each time. And so, and obviously it wasn't easy for her to say goodbye, but, she really kind of understood this is what she was doing, um, was so important in the life of these children. And, again, with Noah, that was what really gave him this amazing start. And I was so
Yeah.
grateful to her.
The plane ride home was a bit of a challenge,
Uh,
right? Let's talk about that briefly.
yeah, the plane ride home was the moment where we were like, I thought, hey, I already have 3 kids at home. I know how to parent. I got this. I didn't have this. He cried for 16 out of the 18 hours on our flight from Seoul to Chicago. And there was, one of the flight attendants was able to help me for a little bit because, it was one of those hard things where there's nothing, I was doing my best, right? There was nothing else that I tried everything, and I was getting the nasty looks from people, and I was standing in the galley literally the whole time, and people would open the curtain to take a look to see, whose child was that. And it was really hard because, you have in your mind how you think things are going to go. Things don't ever go how you think they're going to go. And that was one of those
No.
big moments.
I think I had mentioned an earlier time when my first son was 3 months old. We took him to Israel because we already had the trip planned. So we just went, and he was crying a lot. He had colic, and we were in Masada. And if you know anything about Masada, it echoes, right? And he was crying and crying. And we got on the little tram to go back, and he was still crying. And 4 days later, we were in Jerusalem, and a man stopped me and he said, "Excuse me, were you in Masada a few days ago?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I recognize the scream of your child." And I thought, wow, wow. It's amazing after experiences like this that we have other children, that we adopt other children. But you know what, Simone, we get through it, right?
Yeah, it's like anything else. If it's worth it to you, if it's important, then you do it. Like, these are bumps in the
Right.
road. These are not, boulders that are obstacles to our journey. They're moments in time that we work through. And there was a lot of work through going on there, but again, he's an amazing kid. And
Yeah.
I had to figure out how to parent him. There isn't like the one manual that says, here, parent this every child the same. It just doesn't work that way, at least not for me.
Right.
So,
No, and no, with any of our children, right? Really are all different. And
yeah.
once we all realize that, then we learn how to parent differently. Then when did you decide to adopt your 2 other children from Ethiopia? How did that go? Like, when was that family moment where you were sitting at dinner or lunch or wherever, and we said, you know what? We're not done. How did that go?
Yeah, it was pretty much like that. We were sitting at dinner, and we said, I'm sure someone was crying at the time, and Rob and I looked at each other and said, "What do you think? Should we do it again?" And they're like, and the kids are like, "Really? Really?" And we're like, "Yeah, and let's talk about it." And that was the discussion. And we had a family discussion for each adoption. We actually took a blind vote because, and obviously when they were little, it was like, oh, cool, a new sibling, right? And when they were really little, it's not like they could vote. Like, Noah couldn't vote at 18 months old for Ari, but it we wanted them at part of the process because we felt it was really important for them. They're going to be helping. It takes a village, right? So especially when you're, more than 3 kids, you're past zone defense. There's like so much at one time that you need the older ones to help. And so, we
Right.
did take a blind vote each time, and it was amazing to see how the kids were just, yes, this is yes.
What was the trip like in Ethiopia when you then adopted Ari? What was that like?
Yeah, that was really Noah's trip was life changing. This was even more life changing. To When we got to the orphanage, we had our older girls with us, and obviously seeing that through their eyes, they were 5 and 8 years old at the time, and really seeing their response to being at the orphanage. Like, there were days that we could go and, kind of tour around a little bit, and the girls never wanted to leave the orphanage. They wanted to stay. They wanted to hold the babies, play with the
Oh,
toddlers. they truly became completely attached to the children there. And when we first walked into the orphanage, and I tell this story in the book about, Ari was there, it was lunchtime, and, he was eating his lunch, and they had prepared him,
Oh,
we had to send a photo album. And so, like, he had seen our pictures, he knew who we were. And so we walked in while he was eating lunch, and I sat down next to him, and he started feeding me some of his food. And to me, that was like such a special
wow.
moment, because this is a child who is truly starving, and he is giving me his food. And I was like a mess, of course. And it
Oh.
was, the beginning of our story together. And he's such a great kid, and a funny kid, a fun kid, and he's absolutely meant to be part of our family. So
And when you first adopted him, he wasn't really all that healthy, right? I mean, he had been starving. It's a very poor country. It's got to be very difficult, but it must be very inspiring to know that you were able to help this one person, right?
So it's funny, we kind of, when we've adopted each child, we kind of never look at it as really helping them. We look at it just being part of our family. And we also think that, how much they've opened our eyes to the world. We definitely, one of those situations, we definitely get more than we give. I definitely believe that
Right.
when it comes to our adoptions, we've just learned so much. But, really seeing where he grew up. He lived in a mud hut, no running water, no electricity. He had rickets, he had legs that were bowed out, and
Wow.
ringworm all over his scalp. He never, until we met him, he didn't own a pair of shoes. So he has scars all over the bottom of his feet. He was 4.5 years old, and, you go everywhere there on foot. And so, it was,
Wow.
again, eye opening.
Wow. And then how much after did you then adopt little Millie from Ethiopia?
Yeah, it was the next year, actually. So, it was one of those moments, when we were leaving the orphanage to catch our flight back to the States, we got on this bus with Ari, and there were other families with us as well. And the girls instantly started crying because of all the kids that we
Oh,
were leaving behind. And it doesn't work that, they're like, "Oh, can we put in an application for this child or this child?" It doesn't work that way. You get
no.
matched. The adoption agency matches you with a child. So, we knew we were going to be back again, because these kids they just want someone to love them. They just want to hold your hand. They want to sit in your lap.
Oh,
And it just is, um, it's overwhelming, and you just,
it's
you know,
overwhelming even hearing
yeah,
about it. I have to tell
yeah,
you, Simone, really, I'm almost starting to cry just hearing about
yeah.
it because I'm visualizing the experience that you all went through and how beautiful that you then adopted Millie. And what's Millie like? What was Millie like when you brought her home?
Ooh, Millie, so I traveled with Jacob for that one. Rob stayed home with the rest of the gang, and Jacob came with me. And, Millie, it was tough, because she was the sickest of our kids when we brought her home.
Mm,
She also had kwashiorkor, which is the protein deficiency where they get the really enlarged abdomen. So she
right.
couldn't sit up. She could barely walk. At the time, there was a measles outbreak at the orphanage. So they had to be kept in their rooms, which means she stayed in the crib most of the day. And, she really was, um, she was scared to death of us. And,
Oh,
so 5 days before I could really get near her, and I was like, and I would say to Jacob, I don't know how we're going to get her home. Like,
how old was she?
she was two and a
How old
half.
was Millie? She was two and a
Yeah, she
half,
was
but
two and
yeah,
a
she
half.
scared. She was
Yeah.
scared, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was a really tough moment, thinking, okay, again, almost like the Noah moment, where I think, okay, I've done this before, kids like me. Okay, well, this isn't how it works, so,
Yeah.
really taking the time and just sitting by her crib for hours on end, and trying to, we would play this game where, I'd put the ball in her crib and she'd throw it back out, and then, I'd get a little bit of attention, but it was day 5, she let me feed her, and I was like, okay, we're going to be able to get home. And
Wow.
from then on, she was attached to me until she was a teenager. But, like, when she first came home, I wore her in a pack everywhere. Even when I was cooking dinner, I had her in a pack on my back, because she wanted me to carry her everywhere. Um,
Simone, how do you have enough time and hours in the day to love six children? How do you do that? Because you're a busy person, right? You're
yeah,
involved in the community. You've been an accountant or worked in accounting. Your husband is a successful physician, and may I add, you live in Sarasota, Florida, which is my hometown, and I
mm,
love. Where? How did you get extra hours in the day, Simone? How did you do it?
yeah. I think in terms of love, there's endless love, right? So in terms of hours in the day to get the work done, there's certain things that just don't happen, right? Like that's how life works. Is like you have your priorities of what's important. I remember once a friend said to me, she's like, if you want to see my house clean, come over on Wednesdays. If you want to just hang out with me, come over any day of the week. And
Ah,
I look at it that way as well. Our life, we live in a house that is meant to be lived in. Trust me, it's not like it's a disaster area. And especially now it's like completely clean because they're older. But, you know, we live in our house, they play with toys, and so what we focus on is the time spent with them, not the
yeah.
time spent cleaning up after them. And it all falls into place. And it's always been chaotic, but amazing.
What I love about this book is you talk about each adoption in detail, but you also talk about what you learned and your entire family learned about so much about being a human being, right? From this experience, everything from you like to call yourself, I'm just an ordinary girl. I don't know
Mhm.
about that. I think you're pretty extraordinary to me. But every human being needs to be valued. Change the way we see ourselves. I mean, just so many little nuggets that I got out of this book. Um, Gosh, were you just born with that kind of an attitude, Simone? I know it's you and your sister. You grew up with one sister, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't have that attitude growing. I struggled for a long time to kind of realize my purpose and where I wanted to be. I think that was the biggest thing. I grew up with two very strong parents. My mother has an amazing story. She grew up in rural Pennsylvania. Her mother had a sixth grade education. Her dad worked in the coal mines and a local brewery, but she knew she wanted to be educated. And so she started working for another family, saving her money, and she applied and got into the University of Pittsburgh. And while at the University of
Wow.
Pittsburgh, she wanted to be a doctor. And so same thing. She worked three jobs. She was one of five women in her medical school class. She graduated in
Wow.
1965. And so I had truly amazing role models, but I think I struggled to see, they had to work so hard to get to where they were, and all of these pieces. I couldn't really figure out, what my value was, what my purpose was, and where I wanted to be. And so it took all of these moments to say, wait, this is your purpose. And all of these little things that I do every day and that we all do every day truly impact the people around us. And, you know, we don't need to be someone that we're not. We need to be us. Everybody else is taken, so, when we look at ourselves, we need to be proud of who we are and see the impact that we're making on the world.
I like how you also talk about how your Jewish faith is very important to you and the lessons learned from the traditions of the Jewish faith. Can you tell us about that? You also do a great deal of speaking at your local Jewish federation, and I have a feeling you're going to be speaking a lot more
Yeah.
because this book is extraordinary. But tell me some of the lessons learned through
Thank
your
you.
faith.
Yeah. I have never been someone that is very religious, but I really believe in tradition, obviously family, the things that really bring us together. And, you know, for me, Jewish values, which I do talk about in the book, they're human values. They apply to everyone. So when we talk about,
Hmm.
peace in the home, or, respect your neighbor, all of these things that are just part of, the things as a human, I feel are so important. But it
Hmm.
really does they define me. And I think that was how I was raised. My parents were, you know, as physicians, they were, very particular about certain things. And, I really wanted to impart, hopefully, on my children, things about making the world better and not just focusing on ourselves. Because, at the end of the day, I think it's so important to really care for the people around us, and not just our family, but our neighbors, our friends, and the strangers the people that we don't know that might need this human connection. So,
Well, you talk about the people you don't know. There was a story about you running into a woman at a store, right? And she saw you with your daughter, Millie, and she asked you a question. Can you tell us about that? And I love the way you handled this.
yeah, thank you. So, it was one of those moments where you're like waiting for something, I guess. She walked up and she said, "May I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." And she said, "How much did you pay for her?"
Oh,
And of course, instantly I was like, like
right. It's like, oh,
why, what is this, and I took a step back and I said, okay, it's really important to understand, okay, yes, words matter, but sometimes people don't understand how to ask a question, right? They don't know the right words to use. And, I know for me, sometimes I feel that I better not ask because I'm going to fail because I'm going to use the wrong words. She used the wrong words, but she asked the question. And so when
right.
I said to
It was
her,
from her heart, right? Yeah.
yeah. So I said to her, why do you ask? And I said, first, you don't pay for children, but why do you ask? And she said, well, my daughter hasn't been able to get pregnant, and they're looking at adoption, and I really want to help her with the adoption fees, but I don't know if I can afford to, and I'd love to, and she's like, I didn't want to offend you. That's not what I meant. And I said, I
Right.
understand
Right.
that. So it was a conversation of like, okay, this might be a better way to ask it. And, you know, but I think it goes back to like understanding that most of the time, not all the time, people do have good intentions, and
They
sometimes
do.
they just don't know what to say. And so, it's okay to make mistakes. And, but for me, it was like one of those moments where, like, see, this is why, you don't like instantly get angry at something because you don't know where the direction is going. It was a
Which
really
is
good
a
learning
lot.
lesson for me.
But that's the undertone of this entire book. A lot of the lessons learned, right? Um, Everything happens for a reason. We talk about that in chapter 6. It's okay to be human, right? Chapter 7. Um, you don't have to move mountains in life. You could just move a little bit at a time. There's lessons in this book that I took to heart. I really do, because we all live in a little too much of a fast-paced world. I try to make it not so, but we do. And that's the beauty of this book, in addition to um, going through your entire adoption story with each of your children. What did you learn the most about yourself through this journey, and your family too, by extending your family to 6 children?
I learned a lot. I
Yeah.
learned that I don't think I understood what patience was until, Noah came home. I thought I knew what patience was, and that was a whole new level of patience, and really understanding to, really, it takes time to figure things out, and to be patient with myself as well. It's not just to be patient with other people, but I think sometimes we're so hard on ourselves that, it's hard to move forward with anything. And that for sure was one thing I learned, is like, it's okay not to be so hard on yourself all of the time. That, you know, mental toughness is one thing, but constantly criticizing yourself for things, just, it doesn't really get you anywhere. I don't believe it does. I,
Wow.
I don't know. I really learned so many things, and also realizing what I was capable of, those kinds of things that I think, again, we don't give ourselves enough credit for the things that we're already doing. So we don't believe in ourselves to be able to take on more or do something different. When you talk about the mountain piece, right? Like you don't have to move mountains, but also, you can climb them. So,
Which you did, right? Oh my God. Can you briefly just hit upon that? Like, wait a minute. Like, you don't have enough to do? You decided after all this to go and climb what, Mount Kilimanjaro? I mean, come on, Simone. What are you made of? Because you've got more hours in your day and you're like a superwoman for real. Come on.
uh, again, I'm an
What was that
ordinary
like?
girl. I'm an ordinary girl with again, everybody is unordinary. Everybody has extraordinary moments. This is one of those extraordinary moments, right? Where
I would say, oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I mean,
I was asked to do it, and I said yes. And had I climbed anything before, that would be a no. I live in Florida at sea level.
right at sea level. Okay. Like, I think like the biggest little hill there is like 1 foot above sea level or 3 feet at
Yes.
the most. Right.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
fact that you said, I can handle Mount Kilimanjaro, when did you do this? 2015 you did it?
Yes, 2015.
Wow. Was
Just
it hard? I mean, what did
yeah.
you tap into to get through it?
Yeah, I actually, as soon as I committed, I trained for 6 months.
Right.
I was obviously in the best shape of my life. Now I'm in
Oh,
COVID
yeah.
shape, as I call it. But it really, it was not only a physical challenge, it was a mental challenge. And for me, it was so impactful for so many reasons. But, I was raising funds for the Livestrong Foundation. And so it was part of something called Survivor Summit. So some of the people that, I hiked with were cancer survivors, or we were,
Wow.
hiking and climbing in honor of a family or friend who was in treatment or who had passed away. And it just added that extra layer of purpose, right? And how to work together as a team. These are people that I had never met before. My tent mate was, now she's a good friend, but at the time I didn't know her, but now I'm sharing a tent with her. And so it was a remarkable experience.
Yeah. You know what else I got out of this book, which you talk about a lot? It's not what you go through, it's how you react to it. You said that quite a bit, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's so true, right? That's with anything, right? No matter what happens in our lives, right? And also, life isn't fair and you're not alone. There's so many nuggets to get out of this book. Um, yeah, but how you react to it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah.
It's how you react to it.
I'll give you two quick stories on it, because one is like the reality check story. So the first story is my daughter, during my daughter Olivia, who's now a freshman in college, so this was last year. She was diagnosed with Crohn's. She was really sick for a bit. She had lost a ton of weight, and we, finally she had a colonoscopy done, and they diagnosed her, and it's pretty severe. And so she's on
Wow.
special injections and everything for it. And at the time, and I said to her, because this is the attitude, I said to her, like, okay, you can, we're going to be upset about this for like 3 or 4 days. Pick the number of days, and then we're going to move forward. Because if we stay in this place, we're going to have a really hard time moving forward. And so she did.
Right.
She was like, I was like, eat crap food for a few days, and then you got to start following the plan that, to move forward.
Right.
We could have reacted in a completely different way,
Right.
and she could still be miserable right now, but she's kind of like, yeah, I have Crohn's, like there's certain things that she's restricted on, and that's it. Like, her attitude is so good. We didn't wallow in the sorrow, although there's probably days that we wanted to.
Yeah. But there's no doubt that comes from you. Okay. You've taught them well, Simone. You've taught them well. You were going to tell
Yeah.
us another story.
Yeah. So this is the story where I still need to be taught by my children. And again, I think they are the best teachers because they are completely honest. So another Starbucks story. We're at a Starbucks drive-through, and I left enough space for a car the way that the drive-through was quite full. And so I left enough space for a car to get around me if they needed to. Well, instead of a car trying to get around me, they just cut in front of me and went into the line. And so instantly I was like, are you kidding me? And, I'm with Millie. And so, like, I'm frustrated. And she says to me, Mom, I think you should probably reread your book. She's like, I don't, I don't know why you're getting frustrated about this. This is really not a big deal. Who knows? Maybe this woman needs a cup of coffee and she needs to get to work, or she didn't even notice, like, all of these things. And I'm like,
Wow.
you're right. Like, take a step back. And then, of course, we get up to the window to pay, and the woman in front of us had paid for our drinks. And so, again, one of those moments where you're like, why do we make a big deal about these things? So then Millie said, since she paid for our drinks, can we pay for the drinks for the people behind us? And I said, yes, we can.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was one
Wow.
of those moments where I'm like, our kids teach us so many things.
Wow. Extraordinary. You've done well, Simone. They teach us, but you certainly taught them. For anyone, before I let you go, who is considering adoption, what would you say to them? Clearly, you've made it
Yeah.
look like something we all would like to do. But any words of advice that you would give to them or wisdom?
Yeah, I think, I'll start with that. Our children start at a place of loss, right? They've lost everything,
Oh,
that they've started with in their life. And so we can't really, because that means replacing, and we don't ever want to replace anything, but understanding that